This is the Montana Outdoor Podcast, brought to you in part by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. And by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. Now, get ready for more fascinating topics and the most interesting people you will ever find in Montana's great outdoors. We offer new podcasts most every Saturday. You can get a link to these podcasts by going to our website, montanooutdoor.com, or by going to our Facebook page, or just send an email to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com and say send a link to my email. It's that simple. Now let's head out with your host, Downrigger Dale, and see what's going on in Montana's great outdoors.
Hey, thank you so much, Manny. And yes, you heard right. This is Downrigger Dale with the Montana Outdoor Podcast. And as always, well, not always, sometimes the captain sneaks away, but I do have the captain of the Montana Outdoor Radio Show on with me. He's over in Fort Peck, Montana. And we've got a very special guest we're going to be talking to in a second that I'm excited to hear from. He is in the state of Montana. He would be, I think, in the fishing legend kind of category. He has been up on the Flathead Lake area for a long, long time, and is one of these guys that is a pretty incredible fishing entrepreneur. And both the captain and I, Captain's known him a long time. And so, Captain, I'll let you do the introduction because our guest is Dick Zimmer. If any of you have fished much, especially in northwestern Montana, you know that name very well. So, Captain, I'll let you introduce Dick, and maybe you can start with how you met this legendary fisherman.
All right. Well, I tell you what, Downrigger, he wasn't. I didn't think he was legendary when I met him. I know he was knowledgeable. It was years ago, back in the 80s, I believe, is when I first met Dick Zimmer. I know that we were doing a local radio show called Catching the Big Ones, and I had the opportunity to meet him through, I believe, Jens Grahn or Jay Johnson recommended that I get to know Dick. And when I finally had the opportunity to meet him, I also had the opportunity to go fishing with him. And I quickly learned there was more to fishing when you go with Dick Zimmer, his nickname was the Mackman, than I ever realized. I mean, I'm talking about how you come up with these lures, because he makes his own lures. Zimmer Tackle is an independent tackle company that has been in business in Montana for longer than just about any independent tackle company has been in business. I mean, Dick he's passionate about what he does, and he's passionate about the bodies of water. He has many opinions on how the fish should be and how the bodies of water should be conducted. But anyway, that's how I got to know Dick. I really have a lot of respect for him, and I know a lot of folks around western Montana have a lot of respect for Dick as well. Dick, good morning. And
good morning.
We appreciate you joining us here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast. So let's talk a little bit about the first question I have, Dick. How did you get into the tackle business? I understand you went to school, and in fact, in one article that Downrigger was telling me about before we started doing the podcast, said that you've been fishing Flathead Lake for 70 years. How old are you?
Well, I caught my first fish when I was about 5 years old, and that was right below Hubbard Dam, and it was catch and release. They made me let it go. So around that time, our family lived a block from the Flathead River in Polson, and so whenever there was any opportunity, I was down on that body of water doing all kind of things, but primarily fishing. We were raised in a family where hunting and fishing was what you lived for. You worked for money and you lived for hunting and fishing. And so from there, I had a lot of varying experiences. I was at one point when the hippie movement was big time. I got involved in all of that, and and I ended up in Missoula, and got married, and my wife had a couple of kids, and we had 3 more. And so I always believed that if you could involve your family in your business, that was the best way to bond and to raise kids and to develop their work ethics. And so at that particular time, I was working at American Dental on Reserve Street and in Missoula. And we also, for a little extra money, we decided to develop a night caller business. And so I was at nights catching night callers and in the daytime making dental instruments. And we would just set a cooler out. We had a sign out and people would help themselves and leave money. One time somebody stole our cooler, and a guy, we'd already developed a reputation, found our cooler and brought it back to us. And so we were selling night crawlers. And then because at this dental plant, there was a lot of steel. And then, making dental instruments, that's high quality steel. And so I decided that I never was happy with any gaffs that were for ice fishing. They either were too big or they were a treble hook that would catch on the ice. So I decided to develop a small bend ice fishing gaff using the leftover steel. So it was high quality 440 steel. I made ice fishing gaffs. And so that was our beginning was night crawlers. And then I would travel around Montana selling these gaffs. And then we decided to move up to the Polson area where I was originally from. And things just fell into place. The fellows that had been providing bait for all of the convenience stores around had decided to do it by shipping rather than actually traveling to the stores and delivering the bait. And so that opened a whole area of our business, the bait end of it. And we started selling night crawlers. The Polson Golf Course was a great source of night crawlers. And here again, I would spend hours at nighttime all by myself out there on the golf course catching night crawlers. And it was a living, and I told my kids, I said, you don't need a lot of education in this business. All you need to do is be able to count to 12 and you're good. So yeah, it was, a good beginning, and it kind of evolved from there. There was a Lake Trout jig called a Nordic. I had a friend named Jim Funk who was a real avid fisherman, and he spent a lot of time fishing for lake trout. And this jig called a Nordic was a lure Jensen, I think, made it, and I don't think they make them anymore. But anyway, I looked at that and I thought, that's just a piece of lead with some paint on it and a hook, and I should be able to make something like that. Mm-hmm. And so that was the beginning. I bought a jig mold from Do It Mold. It was called a casting spoon, and we renamed it the Mac Attack. And at that particular time, we had another thing came into play that had a lot to do. Is that phone's probably coming through? But
that's
anyway,
okay.
That's all right. You got a business to run too.
Yeah. So anyway, the lake went through a transition. previous to the time that we started this business, it was a lake that had the primary draw was Kokanee Salmon, and the Lake Trout was a far secondary desire for the fishermen. They didn't think too much of the Lake Trout. They fed on kokanee. They were really fat, and guys catch those things and they want to keep their biggest fish because they're invariably they're catching huge fish, and you take that home. But then your conscience bothers you if you don't eat it.
Yeah.
And so guys are doing all kind of things to try to make these fish edible. Well, about the time we came in the mid '80s. The history of the Micey shrimp was that in Kamloops Lakes in Canada, they began catching these monster kokanee. And they determined that it happened because they were feeding on these little shrimp called Micey shrimp. And so to them, that was, kokanee was such a popular fish that to them, any lake that had kokanee in it, we need to put Micey shrimp in it. And Kamloops Lake's not having lake trout in it. So they planted Micey shrimp in a variety of cold water lakes that had kokanee in them, and mostly with good results. But then they found out where there was lake trout, what the Micey shrimp do. They feed on plankton just like kokanee do, but they come up at night and then they go back to the bottom during the day. Well, in most lake conditions, the richest area on the lake is just above what they call a thermocline, where the plankton are the richest. And so these Micey shrimp changed the nourishment from the high-level nourishment from up in that layer. They took it all the way to the bottom. And lake trout, which normally don't have a real high survival rate on their small fish, all of a sudden had a source of food they never had before. And in Flathead Lake, it was like an explosion. All of a sudden, there was lake trout everywhere. And whereas in the past, if you fish for them deep, you might occasionally pick one up when you were fishing for kokanee. All of a sudden, they were everywhere. I saw a lake trout that when the ice was clear, he had his belly in the mud and his dorsal fin on the ice chasing perch. So they were hungry and looking for food. So at this time, and then the electronics began to be much more sophisticated, and you could find fish. You had a fish finder, whereas in the past you either trolled or just hit and missed looking for fish. Now you had a means to find them. So all these things coming in conjunction, it created a huge market for a different type of fishing, which was jig fishing. And so we were kind of the first into it. So that gave us we were a little ahead of everybody else. And the thing about fishing is it's a little worse than farming. It not only depends on weather conditions, but it also depends on the whims and ways of fishermen. And if you, as being fishermen, you have ways that are successful, and you get in a rut about those successful ways, and you don't want to change. Well, what a manufacturer wants to do is have fishermen get in a rut where they're using his tackle.
Yeah.
And so I was in a perfect position to present tackle that nobody else was presenting. And so that was, everything came together in a way that our tackle business really exploded and bloomed all at once. So that's kind of how we got started. And we've just developed from there.
Well, there we go. We just heard Dick Zimmer's entire life boom just like that. I've never seen the captain sit this quiet for this long. So you broke a record right there. For those of you that listen, and Dick, we have listeners not only just here in Montana, but listeners from all around the world. The lake that Dick's talking about is Flathead Lake. Up in northwest Montana. Now, Dick, as I understand it, those Micey shrimp they were put to try to stimulate the kokanee population. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
Right. They didn't plant them directly in Flathead. They planted them in Whitefish Lake, which is the Whitefish River is one of the tributaries into Flathead and into Swan Lake. And Swan River also is tributary into Flathead Lake.
Right.
So they believe, because these shrimp have a tendency to stay deep, that they wouldn't spread, that they were going to be isolated in these two lakes. Well, that held true for a while, but then somehow they made it down the systems and got into Flathead Lake.
Yeah, they worked their way in, and then unfortunately that decimated the whole Kokanee salmon population. And I know the Salish Kootenai tribe's been trying to do some things to reduce the Mackinaw, or as Lake Trout, but up here folks, so you know what we're talking about when we say Macs, they refer to them as the Mackinaw to try to get them down. In fact, we had the biologist for the Salish Kootenai tribe and the folks that do the Mac days on, and we got pretty good, interesting education on that as well from their side of it.
That was Barry Hansen and Cindy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
go ahead.
I was going to say, Dick, it would be very easy to do podcasts if all of our guests were like you. You ask a question in an introduction, and then you just leave the microphone off and lets you just, and that's the way it is fishing with the Mackman. He's fascinating when he gives information. For example, on the lures, he talked about the Mac Attack, another popular lure, and I want to talk a little bit about lures right now that you manufacture. You have a website. It's zimmertackle.com, and let's see, you have the Leadagator. Let's talk about the Leadagator. That's a Lake Trout lure, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so how did you come up with that Leadagator?
Oh, okay. Well, at the particular time, I was thinking in terms of more efficient ways to catch fish. And at that particular time, the white fishing had really picked up in the lake too. And guys were using crocodiles. And, a crocodile is a brass or steel lure that doesn't have the weight that lead has.
Right.
And so, and they were pretty effective. But I thought, well, now if I can make something that's like a crocodile, that's the name Leadigator, then that will be a lure that will go down quicker and could very well be more efficient than using a lighter lure. So I got myself a Dremel tool and blocks of aluminum, and I put hinges on my blocks of aluminum, and then I would begin to use the Dremel tool to make a cavity to pour lead into. And so the Leadigator was one of my first attempts, and it actually turned out pretty decently. And so I decided once it proved to be an effective lure, very few lake trout fishermen that don't have a Leadigator, and very frequently use it. There's a family of fellas named the Bensons, and they, I think they were 4th, 5th, and 6th in this last tournament.
Yeah, Spring Mac Days.
Yeah,
and they all take to Leadigators. They fish them in different ways, but they all have been faithful and loyal to fish Zimmer Leadigators. So when you have that type of cadre of fishermen, that is good for business. And so these guys have been a real help in pushing Zimmer Tackle. And, a lot of the success that we've had is because fishermen are a unique group of people. They are, I hate to say this to hurt anybody's feelings, but they're a cut above as far as being communicators and having a sense of togetherness than the rest of society.
Hey,
but that's a prejudice, of course.
Yeah. Hey, Dick, we're going to take a little break here and talk about one of our sponsors. And so if you want to just hang tough there, and then we'll be right back with you. But while we're taking this break, I want you to think about a couple things, because you've piqued my interest in a lot of things. One in particular is we've talked about, the conception of the Leadigator and that. So when we come back, I'd like you to kind of take us through the different lures that have been, the most popular there with your customers,
okay,
and talk about it. So we'll get to that in a minute. But Captain, I wanted to bring up one of our sponsors here that has just been incredible to us, and that is
I was going to say, we call them the Leadagators.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the Superior Hardwoods of Montana is what we're talking about. They're in Missoula. Now, those of you that go through Missoula, Montana, you're going to see them right there by the big peak workout, the big round building that is the athletic center there, and they're right across from there. Can't miss them because they got a huge yard there full of all kinds of wood. But tell us about your experience, Captain, of having them make floors for your new home.
Well, in Lewistown, we utilized John and Shannon and also Corey. All of them kind of help with getting us. My wife, Bernie, wanted to do hardwood floors on the whole main level. And first process is you go and take a look at the floors. They have so many different samples. You think, well, it's going to take forever to decide on it. It took Bernie and I about 5 seconds. We both picked the same floor. And because it's a floor that we have a dog, and I don't like to take my shoes off. I don't like my guests to take their shoes off unless they're, muddy or something. And I just like, make things easy. So people come into our house now in Lewistown, and before they say, "How you doing, Captain? Hey, Bernie, good to see you," they go, "Where'd you get these floors?" That's how impressive this flooring that we have picked out. Now, it's either we have a good taste or John and the Superior Hardwood folks have really good looking floors, and probably a little bit of both.
I think it is. And that when they say, "Let us guide you through the woods," which is a neat, catchphrase, I mean, they really are saying what they mean, in that they have all these different woods from woods from the Louisiana swamps to exotic woods from around the world to even repurposed woods like old granaries or old corral board that they bring in their mill and custom mill. We could go on and on, but I'd like you folks to go to Superior Hardwoods and let them guide you through the woods. Captain, what's the website that they have there?
Well, it's Superior Hardwoods.com. And one thing we want to mention real quick is they are always looking to buy wood to repurpose. Yeah. So if you think you have wood to repurpose, get a hold of Superior Hardwoods, and they might guide you to the bank.
Yeah.
With a little cash.
There you go. Superior Hardwoods of Montana. Thanks for being our sponsor, and go see these great folks. Now back to Dick Zimmer with the Zimmer Tackle. So Dick, let's go through some of what would you say is the best selling lure that you've manufactured there?
Well, okay. For lake trout, there's probably in combination are the Leadigator, the Rattle Disaster, and the Glow Grub. And then we fish them and encourage people to fish them with a fly above them. And all of those things in combination make for having a successful day and fairly large catches.
Mm-hmm. Now, how do you come up with those names? That they're synonymous for us fishermen here in Montana. I mean, everybody. You say Rattle Disaster, everybody knows what that is. How did you come up with that name? It's a very unique name.
the Leadagator, because that was a takeoff from the crocodile.
Right.
And the Rattle Disaster. Okay. For whitefish, the two of the most successful lures people were buying were the Castmaster and the Rattlesnakey. And so the Rattlesnakey has a rattle in it, and the Castmaster has a shape that gives it a unique action. So I thought, well, if I can make something that I can expand a Castmaster shape and put a rattle in it, then I'll have the ultimate as far as a whitefish lure. So thus the Rattle Disaster.
There you go.
It rhymes with Castmaster.
There you go. And that Rattle Disaster, for those of you that like to fish the whitefish, again, that's just, everybody knows that's the go-to lure for them. How did you know that was going to be the ultimate whitefish catching rig on Flathead Lake, or did you know? Was it designed originally?
It's like, it's always the idea of making the better mousetrap, and so there was two lures that were working good, and if you can build them in combination, the aspects. See, lure manufacturing, you're appealing to something that the fish will respond to. And oftentimes there's some aspect that they respond to, and if you can magnify it to a degree, then it makes it a better fishing lure. Like, for instance, a big eye, and even the position of the eye has a lot to do with how successful a lure is. And so, it's hit and miss. I've got several jig molds that have sat there for years, and I've kind of given up because they haven't withstood the test of time. I've caught fish on all of them, but there's definitely those lures that continue to work. It used to be in the old days, you could fish almost anything. You could put a broom handle with hooks on it and catch fish. Well, fish go through an evolution, and if you're putting a lot of pressure on any fish, which is going on in Flathead Lake right now with the lake trout, if you put a lot of pressure on any fish that using rod and reel, you're appealing to their sense of needing nourishment, needing food. And so those fish that are really aggressive will be the first ones to come out of the gene pool. And normally what happens is, in a condition where they're using rod and reel to try to control fish numbers, the fish get smaller and harder to catch. And the reason they get smaller is because fish that have a tendency to hesitate and are not real aggressive miss feeding opportunities. Right. And so they begin to get smaller. Well, because Flathead has micey shrimp in it, that feeding opportunities, especially for the more immature fish, isn't ever a problem. They can go down there and just open their mouths and get a meal in a very short order. And also, the shrimp changed the lake trout from a barely edible fish to a wonderful eating fish. Just that change in diet made that much difference. And so, whereas, a lot of people miss the kokanee, when you can fill a cooler up with fish that have nice orange meat, to me, they're kind of an in-between the white meated fish and the rich salmon type fish. And so to me, that's an excellent balance as far as being good food. My wife agrees. She thinks Mackinaw is a great food, and the health benefits. Mackinaw are considered one of the healthiest fish there are because they're rich in omega-3 fats, which are heart healthy. At my age, you have that in consideration. So we like to, and we encourage people to eat lake trout. I'm skeptical on any information that says that there might be mercury's always been something that they've tried to. The thing is, in an environmental sense, if you're trying to eliminate a fishery, you have to have a negative thought towards the fish that you're trying to eliminate. And so the environmental mindset is to make lake trout to have a negative connotation, whereas to a fisherman, he wants something that is good to eat, easy to catch, big numbers to catch. And so there's a disconnect between the man that's a fishing addict and somebody who has an environmental agenda. So anyway, that's, you're probably well aware of that pretty much everywhere.
Yeah. Now, Dick, I want to bring it back to this rattle disaster lure. And one of the things I want to point out to folks, Dick, when he makes a prototype, he goes out and fishes it. How many manufacturers do you know that do that? I don't know. I don't know if the big ones do, like I can't even think one off. Like Rapala. I mean, does I'm not sure the original guy would go out and fish them, but Dick does that. Now, let's get back to the rattle disaster. When you were making that, what is that supposed to represent in that food chain?
Okay. Now, what we were trying to develop was something that would appeal to whitefish. That was our original intent. And so you had to know what was going on with the whitefish. In Flathead Lake, an awful lot of the type of fishing, the approach, and the numbers of fish even that you'll catch revolve around the perch population. And the little perch do a really strange thing. When they hatch out, there's weedy areas in the lake, and that's where the adult perch go to spawn. And then when these little perch hatch out, they just begin to swim indiscriminately. And you can be on 300 feet of water and look down, and they'll stay in about the top 10 feet, and you can see these schools of perch swimming around. Well, towards the end of July, whatever keeps them out there isn't adequate anymore. Either the temperature in that it gets too warm, or the food that they're feeding on isn't enough. And about this time, they're probably 3/4 of an inch long, and they begin to head into the shoreline. And some of them will come in high, but some of them come in low, and they go deep enough that they're under the thermocline. And so that's colder water. And as they're headed towards the shoreline, right where that thermocline hits the bottom of the lake, the perch, it's because from the top to the bottom of the thermocline, there's about a 10-degree temperature difference. And that's a lot for a fish to adjust to. And so they'll ball up right there. And generally, during the whitefishing season, it's anywhere from 45 to 65 feet, depending on the weather and how warm it is above to drive it deeper. But these little perch come in, and I had a scuba diving friend that loved to fish for whitefish, and he wanted to see what was going on down there. So he went down, and he was looking. He says, I all these whitefish are full of perch, and I couldn't see any perch. And there was a little layer of grass down there, and he went to that layer, and he hit his hand in that layer, and perch exploded out of it. And so what you have is these little fish that are they're kind of translucent, and so whatever their background is, that's what the fish see. And these perch are down in these weeds, and so if the weeds are dark green, they appear dark green as well. But then as they come out of the weeds, there's flashes going on. So we have this whole series of whitefish lures. Most of them are dark with reflector tape on them. And so these whitefish, guys have recorded them on their underwater television. And they said they see them with their tails up and their heads down. And what they're doing, they're working that grass. And when a perch comes out of there, a whitefish doesn't have the equipment for grabbing a little fish. And so what they'll often do is slap at them and try to incapacitate them, hit them hard enough that it stuns them.
Oh, okay.
And so when
like a bar
it's
fight.
not unusual at all to snag a whitefish, because when they're making that swat at your lure, you'll snag them. And so it's a combination of presenting a lure that is escaping, is like a little perch escaping, and then one that's already stunned. And so I put maggots on all of my lures, but above the whitefish rattle disaster will generally put a fly. And also, and the reason you bait it with maggots is because previous to the time that they're feeding on these perch, they're oftentimes feeding on small aquatic larvae, and that larva scent that's in maggots apparently is close enough to the scent of what they're feeding on. So that's also imprinted in them. So you're getting the scent of the maggot plus the appearance of an escaping perch, and those two in combination, if you hit it right, you can fill coolers with fish.
And Dick, one of the things that when people say, well, the whitefish bite didn't happen this year, those perch are real key to that whitefish bite. They aren't in the waters, the shallow waters, because for whatever reason, maybe they weren't hatched, maybe it was a poor hatch in East Polson Bay or wherever they hatch. I was just thinking, Downrigger, I love the names that he has for these lures.
Yeah.
Rattle Disaster. I think we could call the Montana Outdoor Podcast Disaster. Maybe that would sound good. Maybe not as good as a lure.
I think some people already call it the Podcast Disaster. But go ahead, Captain.
We probably should give credit for another one of our sponsors at this time. Dick, we're going to be right back with you. I want to talk a little bit about Lake Mary Ronan. You came up with a Kokanee setup, and I want to find out how you came up with that. But we want to talk about Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer Rigger there in Missoula. The mountain man who was on a podcast, about 2 weeks ago, John Perry, he got a hold of Josh over there at Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer, and he bought himself one of them there dump trailers.
Oh, so when John Perry was on with us, he heard us talking about him and decided he better go check it out, huh? Yeah,
he wanted a Diamond C trailer, and it's a dump trailer. If you ever had one of those dump trailers, I own
incredible.
One, and it's just something every person in Montana, if you're going to have a trailer, you need to have a dump trailer because it lifts itself up like a dump truck with a hydraulic.
I think we get the concept there, Captain. Yeah. Dump.
And, and so I'm actually going to see Josh pretty quick here because I'm getting myself one of them there companion hitches for a fifth wheel. And
I talked about that on the last podcast. You weren't on, but I talked about that you had a hard time finding the right thing for your fifth wheel, and you called Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer and said, hey, can you help me with this? And boom, they were right on it, huh?
Yeah, they were. And so you want to go to their website, look at all their inventory. That's what the mountain man did. I actually got him to go on the website. It's RMTTE.com, Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. They're in Missoula, great family business. We definitely recommend you to do business with them if you need a CM truck bed or one of them Diamond C trailers.
Yeah, they've got it all right there at Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. Now back to Dick Zimmer, and you were asking Dick about
Kokanee,
the Kokanee rig. Yeah. What do you call that?
Yeah.
What do you call that Kokanee rig that almost everybody uses?
I don't know which one you're referring to, but we have one now that's superior, and we call it the wannabe. And the wannabe. And the reason is, I begin to get lots of reports that guys were using a Haley's jig in various places, Echo Lake, Bitterroot Lake, Lake Mary Ronan. And I thought, well, this is, here again, it's just a piece of lead with a little chain on it with a hook on the end of the chain. So to get the chain attached, that was the one problem I had to overcome, and finally came up with a little clip that I could put the chain on. And we have another lure, we call it a trilobite. And the trilobite is banana shaped, but the wannabe is using the same blank, but without the bend in it. So it's straight like a Haley's jig. And so I made them up with chains, and they were at least equivalent to the Haley's. And the reason we call it a wannabe because it's a Haley's wannabe. So
why the chain? What purpose does that chain serve?
Well, it moves the hook a ways away from the lure, and it's easier for the fish to ingest it, and it makes it so that you can target smaller fish rather than having a hook directly onto the lure.
Oh,
but anyway, that began to evolve as well. I've been, I was watching on YouTube how these guys were putting droppers below their jigs. So we began to use a short monofilament dropper rather than the chain, and it proved to be way more effective than the chain. So now the wannabe ought to want to be a wannabe.
There you go. What baits do you recommend on that for the kokanee there?
Oh, okay. We make them in 3 different sizes, but I found that the largest size works really well for me. And it's not only an excellent kokanee lure. For kokanee, we make it with smaller hooks, and we have a hook that is just a painted hook. And our take on it is we call it a smile hook. Mm-hmm. And the reason is because no hook can catch a fish without a smile.
There you go.
Yeah, so we have this painted hook, and we put it below, which is something that Haley's doesn't do. They just have a gold hook, and so we have a painted hook. And for the kokanee, everything glows in the dark. So that oftentimes fellas are either fishing out of the ice where their light is diminished, or fishing at night. And so glow is something that's pretty essential to give those fish a sense of sight. So we've developed it that way. And then here again, we put another one of these smile hooks up above it, and we use it as a drop shot through the ice. That seems to work better. And in open water, we have it on a leader. And so we have this combination where a lot of our success has revolved around the idea of a setup that's ready to go. And so all you have to do is tie into the top wire snap, and you're ready to fish. So we sell these, in the store. You can buy them separate, but when we sell them in the convenience stores, we make them in a package where there's a hook above and the jig below, and so it's just more convenient. And you don't have to. We've done the research, and so we know what works. And this wannabe has turned out to be a really good approach. Even the lake trout fishermen are beginning to put a dropper with a big single hook below it, and that's been effective for the lake trout. So that approach with a dropper below a jig is something that it's relatively new to us, but we're it's become my favorite lure. I fish with it more than anything else. One of the things that if you're a smallmouth fisherman and you're stationary for any length of time, the smallmouth will come up under your boat. They feel protected there. So when I'm bait fishing, I'll be bait fishing down below, and I'll take a wannabe with a night crawler on it, put it, especially if there's a current, I'll put it upstream and let it go under the boat. And last summer, I caught my personal best smallmouth, a 6.5 pounder, using that technique with the wannabe. And I was out the other day, we were fishing for bait fish, and I put the wannabe down, and caught 3 smallmouth. I like that when I'm bait fishing is work, but I like to be able to take something home to eat. So I try to include a rig that has something that'll appeal to the perch or the bass or something, so that I'm not just strictly fishing for bait fish.
Okay.
So the wannabe, that's when I'm, a lot of times, you're a little hesitant to suggest something to people, but I'm more and more confident in this wannabe. It's just turning out to be a really good lure.
One of the things I noticed on your website, I don't see the wannabe on the website. Is that you going to put that on the website, or am I missing something, Dick?
Well, we have divisions of labor, and my division of labor is making fishing tackle and doing the research, and my wife's division of labor is all the rest, and she's often overloaded.
Yeah,
and the intention is to get all that on there.
Okay.
And I wasn't aware that it wasn't. We've been talking about it, but a lot of times it's things don't happen fast at Zimmer Tackle.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
No, we understand.
So,
and one of the things about you being an independent tackle manufacturer is that I know it's tough to be an independent tackle manufacturer. One of the things is that some of these big companies, I'm sure, have approached you about buying your products and basically setting you up for life, Dick. The Mackman is going to be on the retirement mode, but I hope that never happens. Not because I hope you don't ever get on the retirement mode, because you are passionate about what you do, and I think you should change your Zimmer Tackle. It should be Zimmer Tackle. It all started with a dozen night crawlers.
there you go. Yeah.
And you got to learn
as far as retirement, there's one sure way to retire, and that's when the Grim Reaper comes visiting your door.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hold out for that, I think.
Well, let's hope that doesn't happen anytime soon. Now, Dick, as far as for folks that are listening to this podcast, a lot of your lures are targeted for Northwest Montana and that, but have folks from out of town had luck in using them elsewhere?
We've shipped them to people that were using them as marine lures in the saltwater. Oftentimes, they're not quite as heavy as they need. A lot of times, when how ocean currents are, you got to have an awful lot of weight. But people from Canada have ordered the Finger Lakes in New York. Talking about knowing people, my brother was in Australia and he was watching a fisherman and started talking to this fisherman, and he asked my brother if he was related to the Mackman. So that had to be just a coincidence, But nonetheless, it's a good business to be well known. That's just
absolutely
the way it be.
ZimmerTackle.com is where you want to go take a look at that, folks. And Dick, we're going to have to get rolling here, but I hope you'll be able to come back and talk to us some more, because you are an incredible wealth of knowledge, and just learning about how you come up with these lures and that has just been fascinating. Captain, you got anything before we run off?
Yeah, I want to remind folks, if you're ever driving up there in Pablo, that's where his main headquarters is located, Zimmer Tackle. Stop in there. He's got everything he talks about during this podcast, plus more. Plus, he's got a lot of, I would call it, it's advice. It's not, I guess it is free advice, but it's not like most of the free advice you and I give, Downrigger, which is absolutely worth nothing. Dick has some great information to pass on to the fishermen. And even once in a while, if you ask him, and he'll ask Paula, can I go fishing with, the captain? Can I go fishing with whoever you are? And he'll go out there and you'll enjoy it, and you'll learn an awful lot with the Mackman, Dick Zimmer, a good buddy of mine. And
if I can't go with you, there are people that can go with you. And I wanted to tell you, Captain, when my wife heard that you were going to do this, she sent one up for you, and so she's wanting you to benefit from all the good you've done us. So we appreciate it.
Well, there you go.
All right. Thanks, Dick.
Thank you, Dick Zimmer. We'll have you on again real soon. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Another great legend. You know, one of our things we love to do here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast is tell you about the folks that make Montana's outdoors the most special place on earth, and Dick Zimmer is certainly one of them. Until then, if you have any questions at all and want to get in touch with Dick, if you go to the podcast description right after you're done listening to this podcast, just go down there. We'll put some links in so you'll be able to find his website and get a hold of him and all that. And Manny's going to come on here in a second, give you my email address, and you can certainly use that to get a hold of me, and I can pass on any questions to Dick Zimmer as well. Until then, get out there and enjoy some fishing, and don't forget to say a few words of thanks for our folks overseas protecting our nation. Until then, take care, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Montana Outdoor Podcast. It has been brought to you in part by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock, high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. And by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. So what did you think of today's podcast? Send your questions and comments to Downrigger at montanaaoutdoor.com. We should be dropping a new podcast this next Saturday. Until then, we will see you soon out in Montana's great outdoors.